Chapter 10. The Red Yarn Clue. All the Hollisters cried out in dismay. "Stolen!" Pam sobbed. "How could anyone be mean enough to steal our Santa Claus?" "And all those nice Christmas presents in the sleigh," Holly wailed. "If Santa Claus's sleigh is gone, all the poor children's presents are too." "I'll hurry down and look things over," Mr. Hollister said, taking his coat out of the hall closet. "There may be some mistake." "Please let me go along," each child begged. "All right, but hurry." Everyone was in the station wagon in a few minutes, and Mr. Hollister drove quickly to the trading post. How different the roof looked, completely empty. Tinker rushed out of the store to meet them, a woebegone expression on his face. "Did you call the police?" Mr. Hollister asked, getting out of the car. Tinker, his hands shaking with distress, said not yet. He would do so at once. "I can't understand why the thieves weren't seen," Mr. Hollister said after the elderly man had gone inside. "We have such good police protection in Shoreham." Meanwhile, the children had jumped out and now started looking for telltale signs of the thieves. Pete was the first to find one. "Dad, look at this," the boy called from the rear of the building. He pointed out deep tire tracks of a truck in the slushy snow. "Our truck didn't make these," he said. "You're right, son, and no big truck came in here yesterday to make a delivery. These marks were made last night." Pam pointed out holes in the ground where a ladder had been raised against the wall. Then Holly found part of a heavy rope, which must have been used to lower the sleigh and reindeer. At that moment, the sound of a siren caused the Hollisters to hurry back to the street. A squad car pulled up in front of the store, and Officer Cal stepped out. With him was another policeman, whom Cal introduced as Detective Farnham. When the policemen were told what had happened, Cal said all available policemen in Shoreham were called to help fight the big fire last night. This block went unpatrolled for about an hour. "So that's when the robbery took place," Mr. Hollister said. "The thieves took advantage of the situation." "There may even be a connection between this robbery and the fire," Detective Farnham spoke up. "Let's go to the roof and have a look for clues." Pete and Ricky brought a ladder from the store, and the two policemen climbed up, followed by Mr. Hollister and his sons. The girls waited below. After examining the footprints on the snowy roof, Detective Farnham said, "There are so many marks here, it would be pretty hard to pick out which ones belong to the thieves. I can't find one clear set of prints." "But the tire prints down below are," Ricky volunteered. "Okay, son, we'll make a plaster cast of them." The Hollisters and the policemen descended the ladder. The detective hurried to the squad car for his special kit, used in taking plaster molds of tire tracks. "We'll get a very good set of impressions," Officer Cal said, as he helped pour the plaster into the deep ridges. Ricky was particularly fascinated. "That's what I want to be someday, a policeman," he said. "Maybe Cal will be chief by that time," Pete remarked with a grin. "Will you give Ricky a job, Cal?" "Sure will," the officer replied. "I'll make Ricky chief of detectives." Then he became serious. Turning to Mr. Hollister, he said, "Do you suspect anybody of doing this job?" The Hollisters looked at one another, and a strange expression came across their father's face. He did not reply, but Ricky burst out, "I'll bet Mr. Tash did it." "What?" the detective cried. Mr. Hollister spoke up quickly, explaining why his son was suspicious, that Mr. Tash had wanted their Santa Claus outfit, but added, "We're not accusing anyone. Ricky, you must be careful what you say." Officer Cal glanced at his buddy. Then, as he picked up the plaster cast of the tire track, he said, "We'll talk to Mr. Tash anyway." The policeman drove off, but the children continued to hunt for clues. "Better take down that ladder, boys," Mr. Hollister said, "before someone else uses it." "Sure, Dad, right away," Pete promised. After the brothers had put the ladder in the store and come back, Pam suddenly called out, "Look, maybe this is a clue." What is it? Pete asked. The girl pointed to a shred of red yarn caught on the brick wall of the trading post. It sure is a clue, Pete praised his sister. One of the men who stole our Santa Claus must have been wearing a red sweater. Holly pulled the fuzzy piece of yarn off the wall and ran to show it to her father in the store. At that moment, the police car returned. Cal pulled up at the curb, and all the Hollisters went out to see what he had learned. Mr. Tash denies knowing anything about the theft, he said. Besides, he had a perfect alibi. I'm sure he's not the man you're looking for. I'm glad of that, Mr. Hollister said. I'd hate to think one of our town merchants would do such a thing. By the way, we sent out an 8-state alarm for your missing Santa Claus, Cal said. What does that mean? Ricky asked. It means policemen in 8 states will join in the search, Cal replied. Ricky danced up and down when he heard this. Then our Santa Claus will be famous, he shouted. No sooner had the boy said this than Holly scooted off down the street like a flash. Where's she going? Mr. Hollister asked in surprise, but no one could tell him. Holly raced down the street, holding the piece of yarn in her hand. Ahead of the little girl was a husky man wearing a red turtleneck sweater. Wait a minute, please, Holly called, catching up to the man. The wearer of the red sweater turned around. He was a tall, strapping young man with a crew cut. You speaking to me, little girl? He asked, smiling. Say, you're cute. What's your name? Holly was somewhat taken aback by the man's friendliness, not at all like she expected a thief to act. But she must not be fooled. Have you a hole in your sweater? She asked. The man burst out laughing. What a strange question, he said. Why do you ask? Holly held the piece of yarn near him. It was the same shade as his sweater. She must learn where he had been the night before. Her heart pounding wildly, she asked, Did you climb our roof last night? Again the man laughed loudly. Then he knelt down until his head was on a level with Holly's. Say, are you a detective? He asked, a twinkle in his eye. I guess so, Holly replied. But if you don't have a hole in your sweater, I guess you didn't take our Santa Claus. It is doubtful if the man in the red sweater ever would have understood what Holly meant had Pam not come up just then with Officer Cal. Hello, Mr. Lang, the policeman said to the man. You know him? Holly asked. Sure, he's our high school football coach. Holly was dreadfully embarrassed. But Pam explained about the shred of wool she had found and had thought might be a clue to the Santa Claus thief. My sister was only trying to help, she said. I didn't mind a bit, Mr. Lang told her. In fact, I enjoyed the whole thing. But I'm sorry to hear that the Santa Claus outfit is gone. It was a nice exhibit. Officer Cal had taken the piece of red yarn from Holly's fingers. He agreed it was a good lead to find at least one of the thieves. I'll take this if you don't mind, he said to the Hollister girls. Please do, Pam agreed. Oh, I hope you find the mean men right away, said Holly, as the officer moved off. Then she turned to Mr. Lang. Please excuse me for stopping you. I'm glad you did. And good luck to you, the coach said, and walked on. Pam and Holly joined the other children, and they all started for home. As they went by the little park in the center of Shoreham, Sue exclaimed, Look, they're putting up a big Christmas tree. Yes, said Pete, that's the town tree. Let's watch. It was the custom of the town of Shoreham each year to erect a giant Christmas tree in the center of the park. The beautiful colored lights would shine every night during the holiday season. Hundreds of visitors from miles around would come to see this, and the creche nearby. The big hole for the tree has been dug already, Ricky remarked. The large truck on which the tree lay had been backed onto the green. Now another truck, equipped with a tall crane, pulled in alongside it. 4 workmen attached a stout cable from the crane to the top of the tree. Roar, roar, the crane groaned as the tree began to rise in the air. Finally, the base of it slipped into the big hole. "Don't come too close," one of the workmen warned the Hollisters and other youngsters who had gathered to watch the spectacle. "This tree won't be safely in place until the guy wires are fast." The men drove stakes into the ground at 4 different points and began to attach long wires, which dangled high on the trunk of the tree. Despite the workmen's warning, the crowd of children pushed closer to get a better look. The Hollisters were shoved right to the front. Suddenly, there was a loud snap. Everyone looked up just in time to see a cable slip off the top of the Christmas tree. "Run, everybody!" a workman shouted. The tree leaned over slowly. Then it began to fall toward the crowd. Pete grabbed Sue in his arms and sped off. Ricky followed close behind, but Pam and Holly could not seem to get out of the way.